looks like we're live right about now. Okay, hi everybody. In this video, I'm going to be figuring out what rules apply for me as a business owner if I were to hire somebody in a different country. Now, the most basic rule is that the person is actually tax registered in the other country. But the question is, what are the rules that apply to me in Sweden if I were to hire somebody in a different country? Because it could very well be that the revenue services in Sweden don't give a damn about what the other person does with their money in their own country, which would be fine by me. Of course, it's that person's responsibility to make sure that they file the necessary paperwork, that they declare their income to the revenue services in that country, that they make sure that they have a good standing with the government in that country. But to me, it's kind of like it's none of my business. So for me, what's important is to just understand sort of what rules apply to me. And I know that, for example, if I do work for clients in a different country, then it is up to me to prove that I'm actually invoicing a real business. So that's why it's important for me to know enough information about the business that I'm working with in order to be able to verify that, because it's simply my responsibility to verify that the client is an actual business. Now, if I hire somebody to do work for me, it's a little bit different. I would guess that the rules are much more diffuse. I guess that would be the right word, and that I could probably do that without much implication, and without. I think I would even guess that I don't have to pay any VAT, but that's something I want to find out, because I don't know what rules actually do apply to somebody who is not registered as a business. So let's call the revenue services and find out. This is the website of the revenue services in Sweden. They have a phone number, and we're going to call this phone number, and we're going to ask them.
Till Skatteverket. For English, press 1.
Let's do this in English.
Här beskriver du kort ditt ärende så blir du kopplad vidare. Beskriv nu ditt ärende.
Företag.
Beskriv lite närmare vad du vill göra.
Ska vi se. Arbetsgivare.
Förlåt, jag uppfattade inte. Här är några exempel på vad du kan säga. Blankett för momsdeklaration. Eller...
Arbetsgivare.
Vänta kvar så kopplar jag dig vidare. Varsågod.
Not sure I understood what I meant.
Ditt samtal placeras i kö.
You're placed in a queue.
Välkommen till Skatteväxväxeln.
Ja, hej. Jag skulle vilja prata med någon som kan förklara för mig vilka regler som gäller om jag som arbetsgivare skulle ta in någon på konsultbasis som befinner sig i ett annat land. För då känner jag att jag har inte riktigt 100% koll på det.
Nej, jag förstår. Jag kopplar in dig. Varsågod.
Tack så mycket.
Många som ringer till oss just nu. Alla köplatser är tyvärr upptagna. Var vänlig försök igen senare.
You gotta be fucking kidding me. So if you didn't understand that, it was like there's too many people calling us right now. All the queue places are taken. Please try again later. Let's try again.
For English, press 1.
Let's see if one
For
works.
civil registration
Yeah,
or personal ID, press 1.
I wasn't fast enough the last time.
For tax-related questions regarding personal tax, press 2. For tax-related questions regarding VAT, value-added tax, press 3. For tax-related questions regarding company tax, press 4.
Yeah, let's press 4.
Switchboard. Your call is put on hold. Expected queue time is 23 minutes.
Oh my god. I'm gonna have to cut this out if I'm gonna wait 23 minutes. I don't know if you feel like watching this video for 23 minutes while I wait in the queue. Right. So it's nice that we can take it in English. I can actually talk English to them so that it would be easier for everybody to understand while we are on the stream. I don't know even if they have this information somewhere on their website, because usually you would require anybody that you hire to be registered as a business in the other country, which is something that I experienced. That like when customers approach me for the work that I do, they usually want to know that I'm registered in Sweden. And the same thing applies when I work with a customer. I want to know that they're a registered business in the other country. But I think it's interesting to find out what rules apply, because it kind of opens up for me in terms of possibilities to hire any one of you for doing any kind of specific task, when it could be something small that you can do very quickly, and we agree on how much you want to be compensated for it, and we agree on what you have to deliver. And I think we can work that way, because I've been working that way. I've been working that way with the clients that I had since 2014. But the only difference is that I've been registered as a business since 2011, and for me it's easy to have that kind of relationship, because everything.
Calls ahead of you in the queue.
Because all the paperwork becomes very simple. You just invoice, and you just sort of do the bookkeeping for the invoices. I don't know what applies to the case where the other person is not registered as a business. So it would be interesting to find out. And I'm streaming this as a private stream, because I still want to have a little bit of control over what is being put out there. I don't know if they ask any kind of personal information that maybe I don't want to put out on the internet. So for now, I simply feel more comfortable just keeping this as a private stream, and sort of just seeing how it goes. But I think it's going to be a very interesting stream. I'm definitely confident that this could be just published the way it is.
In the queue.
Although she doesn't tell me how many calls, so I don't know how much longer I have to wait. So I think that this can probably be published the way it is, and without even cutting out this long period of waiting for them to answer it. But we'll see. Let's see here. I have to continue working on my UDP service that is going to be listening on a UDP socket on a small robot, which it's going to be listening on the UDP socket on the embedded side, and there will be a UDP client communicating with this service from the laptop side, and everything is going to go over a radio link, which is not an actual Wi-Fi link, but it's still an Ethernet link. And I've been having some trouble actually getting packets to be accepted on the other side. I don't know if I'm maybe setting up the socket wrong, or if I maybe have to specify like a broadcast address or something in order to be able to receive them. It's probably something like that. It's probably something in terms of binding the socket, like just doing it correctly. So I have to debug that. But the client side will be sending information to this service, and then the service will communicate over RP message
ahead of you in the queue.
from the IMX processor on which the Linux system is running to a Cortex M4 core, because this is an asymmetric system. It has Cortex M4 and a Cortex A7 on one chip. So it's going to be communicating over this internal RP message protocol, which is implemented partly in hardware, and which allows messages to be sent from the A7 core to the M4 core, and done so in a thread-safe fashion, because both systems are completely independent. The M4 core is running FreeRTOS-based system, and the A7 core is running Linux, so you have to have hardware support for that kind of synchronization. They have no idea about any kind of synchronization primitives that are present on the other side, so they have to work through a hardware message queue, which is implemented by the RP message subsystem in the Linux kernel, and also in the on the FreeRTOS side. So they're going to be sending, this service is going to be receiving the message, and then it's going to be forwarding that to the Linux kernel, and the Linux kernel is going to then be forwarding the message to the M4 core, and then the messages from the M4 core are going to be copied into the Linux kernel, and this service will then read them out and send them over the network to the client side. And on the client side, then we will have a user interface, which will interface to a joystick for controlling the robot, for doing demonstrations of the robot, and for reading, sort of kind of for displaying all the values that that we can read out from all the sensors on the embedded system. And I'm kind of even thinking, that it would probably be a good idea to write a Linux driver that will expose all the sensor values as SysFS entries, so that you can do things like echo a configuration value directly into a SysFS entry whenever you want to, for example, modify some controller gain or read out some sensor value. You can just do it from the shell on the Linux system. So that's something that I'm going to be looking into once I get this service fully working, and once I get the basic communication completely done from the actual client side to the deep embedded side of this FreeRTOS based system that is running on the Cortex M4 core. Once all of that is working, I can then look into adding those SysFS entries for all the configuration variables on the M4 side. The system itself is built around OpenWRT. I think that OpenWRT has been much cleaner in terms of both much cleaner and much lighter than, for example, the Yocto project. So I use OpenWRT a lot. The way that I typically build an OpenWRT system is like you can have an external kernel that you build. That you specify in the configuration, and then build as part of the main build process. But the approach that I find a lot simpler is to just because even if you use the external kernel, sometimes you end up with patches being applied to your external kernel. There's a little bit of
ahead of you in the queue.
There's a little bit of uncertainty there. I feel that it doesn't always work the way that you would expect it to work. So I find it easier to build the Linux kernel separately. So I just download the Linux kernel from the manufacturer of whatever this SOM module, or directly from NXP when it comes to IMX processors, and then I configure the Linux kernel with a device tree that is specific for this board, and I build both the device tree and the Linux kernel separately using the ARM Linux GNU ABI compiler. And then I build the OpenWRT system to run on an IMX processor. And I just use the rootfs of the OpenWRT system. So I have my own kernel that I build separately. I wonder who is calling. I can't really see who is calling. Maybe somebody is calling. Well, obviously somebody's calling, but fuck it. I build the Linux kernel separately, and I just copy that and boot it up. Sort of try it out, just boot it up from U-boot, and then I copy over the rootfs that I build as part of the OpenWRT build, and that has worked out pretty well every single time. The only drawback about that is that you don't always, like, if you want to have a single build process for everything, if you just want to run make and build the whole system, it doesn't really work that way. But it's still very practical to be able to build the whole rootfs system and to produce a tar file of just the rootfs system.
Ahead of you in the queue.
Of just the rootfs system, which you can then just install into your embedded board. And you get all of the library dependencies sorted out. And also it takes a lot shorter period of time to build it because OpenWRT is such a small system. OpenWRT can fit into a flash of previously it was 8 megabyte. I think now it's more like 16 megabyte, but it's still very small. So you have like a complete Linux system with all of the usual tools. Obviously, it's a minimal set of tools. You have the BusyBox and perhaps a few extra utilities, but nonetheless it's a very small system. So it doesn't take very long time to build the system, and it's also easy to modify it without kind of like wondering, am I doing everything right? There's like many different repos. I think Yocto takes way too long time to build, and I think that Yocto is a little bit too much for a small embedded system. It's obviously easier for people to work with Yocto because it's more similar to how Ubuntu works. But for the most part, things like package management, those things don't need to be very complex for a small Linux system, and OpenWRT solves that very well. So I use OpenWRT for all of my development work. Sometimes customers want to use something else. Sometimes they even use Debian on their embedded systems, which is fine by me, but I'm not going to be waiting for that system to build from scratch. And I'm not going to be handling image files that are more than they should be, like that are larger than they should be. So one of the things also that I have to
ahead of you in the queue,
that I have to make sure works well in this case is sort of building the whole image and just being able to deliver a single image to the customer, which will install both the M4 firmware and all of the A7 rootfs and kernel. And one of the things that also I have to look into is how to actually replace the I have been able to replace the M4 application while the processor is running. So while the Linux system is running, I can sort of memory map the area where the M4 firmware is. I can stop the M4 processor by writing directly to registers of the M4 processor, and then I can load the new software and reset the chip. The problem is that there is also, since you're doing this sort of while the system is running, you have to make sure that you properly reset all of the other peripherals on the board. And I haven't designed this board, so certain things are not really thought out properly. But I think it's perfectly doable in this case to be able to completely replace the running application, restart the system without resetting the Linux side of things, without having to without having to do a full reset of the board, which will just a full reset, power cycling of the board. Even though it's done programmatically, there's a power management chip that can do that. So you can actually just power cycle the board, restart all of the peripherals, and then U-boot will load the M4 application and boot the Linux kernel, and then you're kind of up and running. But I want to avoid that, so I'm going to be looking into doing that directly from the Linux side. So yeah, that's the project I'm working on right now. I don't know how much I'm going to be streaming of that work, because I haven't agreed with the customer to be streaming any details of that work, so I don't want to do that. It's something that I'm going to be trying to weed out moving forward, because I want to be able to stream more. I want to be able to work in a way where the customer feels happy about me streaming things, and that I feel happy about the amount of things that I can stream. I think that for the most part, a lot of this work is kind of it's rather mundane. It's like it's kind of like just bringing up the board, kind of going over all of the schematic, looking how things are connected, like writing the device tree. I don't think it's really anything that that you can't really sort of stream publicly, because this stuff is highly related to the way the board is designed. So it's kind of like the biggest value in streaming it is just in setting, sort of in showing you how to do those things, but not necessarily. Obviously, since you don't have this particular board, you don't have any use for the particular details that are being put into the device tree. But for you, the biggest value would be just looking how is this done? So how is it that you configure a device tree for an embedded system like this, where you have two processors in one, where you have this asymmetric architecture, and sort of what are the steps necessary if you have your own system that you want to do the same thing with? How do you build a complete Linux image for that system, for example? So I think those things are perfectly valid candidates for being live streamed, and I think that most customers should be okay with it. But unfortunately, some people have problem with sort of streaming, no matter how much detail you go into. And I can sort of understand where they're coming from. So I respect that. That's perfectly fine with me. So I wonder how long more I have to wait in this queue. This phone call has been going on for 20 minutes now, so I should be able to get through in about 5 minutes, I guess. I want to have some coffee. I don't think I have any coffee here. No, I'm gonna get some coffee.
you in the queue.
I had to make some coffee because I've drunk all the coffee for today that I made in the morning. It's 12:30 in the afternoon. Alice, come. Come. Hey. Hop. 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 This is my dog. You've seen my dog. I have my dog in a lot of videos. You're a good dog. Titta! Gå och lägg dig. Gå och lägg dig.
Calls ahead of you in
Gå och
the
lägg dig.
queue.
Lägg! Let's see, I think that we're coming through. Usually right before you come through you have this long tone, but apparently that wasn't the case. Huh. Okay. I wonder how else I can improve my website. I can probably put more information on my website. I can probably put some links to my YouTube channel. I'll have to think about that. And I also have to improve the logo because the logo right now is kind of suboptimal. This is just an image. This is not actually real text, which I don't like. That was just something that I did to get this up quickly. Let's see, we've been 24 minutes. I've been waiting 24 minutes. I would be very pissed if in a few minutes they're gonna say, please call again later, because they've done that before. I'm gonna see who called me. Oh, fuck.
Calls ahead of you in the queue.
Fuck, that was FedEx. Fuck. I should have answered that. Fuck. I was really looking forward to that FedEx package. Damn it. I'm gonna have to call him after this phone call. I think that when you're developing software, a very good idea is to structure a build system so that you can actually build your code for a variety of different systems using the same build system. For example, I discover certain issues with my build system when I try to build my libraries and applications for OpenWRT compared to building them just for Linux. And I also discover dependencies that maybe I haven't thought about. And when I put together packages for OpenWRT, so that basically the make files that enable me to build my application, I'm pretty much forced to go over all of the dependencies, make sure that I can build all of the dependencies for a system like OpenWRT, and without any kind of dependencies that shouldn't be there. So I think for the general quality of your code, it's very good to build your code for different systems. Even build your code for an embedded bare metal system like STM32 or Cortex M4 from NXP that is running on this system. Sort of just to get, just to weed out any kind of non-portable parts of your source code, so that all the code that you write is portable. And I think it's for your own benefit to keep all of your code portable, since you will have to reuse your code at some point, and it's always good to be able to just take parts of some code that you've developed previously for one system and just stick it into another system and have it work properly, which is one of the reasons I always use, for example, sized integers, because I can never be sure, well, at least I always use sized integers for any arguments to a function where size can matter, which is mostly always the case. So you cannot expect that an integer is always. You cannot expect that an integer is always 32 bits. You have to specify that explicitly in your code to make sure that that is always the case.
Welcome to the text information, Michaela.
Yes, hello there. I have a question about the rules that apply to me if I have a business in Sweden and I would like to take in somebody from a different country as a consultant, but suppose that person, do I have to is it my responsibility to make sure that that person is tax registered in their country, or is it solely the responsibility of the other person? And do I have to worry about VAT or any other details if I do that?
Okay, I do understand the question. The thing is, you should talk to my colleagues because it's like an international touch with this kind of question.
Okay.
And as well as the VAT, because of that you mentioned that, you have to talk to my colleagues that are working with just the VAT questions. But just hold the line and I will transfer your call to my colleague.
So do I have to wait for 25 minutes more to talk to your colleague, or can it be done faster?
I'm not sure. Could you hold the line?
All right.
For a moment?
Please come back to me and let me know how much I have to wait, if that will be a long time. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's just put this on mute. So I'm not sure. I'm never sure if they put me on mute or if they put themselves on mute. I'm never sure if they can actually hear what I'm saying. So I put myself on mute just to make sure that I don't have to worry about that. But this is nice that we can actually talk in English with them, so I don't have to put any subtitles on this video.
Situation. You had some questions about hiring a person from abroad.
Yes. Hello, Nicholas. I have a question. So let me take this from the beginning. I have a business in Sweden, And I'm considering perhaps hiring somebody as a consultant from a different country. And I would like to know what rules apply to me as a business owner in Sweden, and whether I need to worry about any specific details, or whether all of the tax questions are actually the responsibility of the other person in their own country. Do I have to worry whether they are even a registered business? Because I suppose that from my perspective, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of like it's their job to make sure that they file the necessary paperwork. Or is that so? Do I have to worry about anything in a situation like that?
Okay. You're saying you want to employ a consultant?
Yes. For example, if I know a person that has a skill that could contribute to something that I'm doing, and obviously I would like to compensate them for the job that they're doing, but it's not like an employee. It's more like for example, if the person were properly registered as a business in the other country, it would be very simple. Then we just invoice. Then they just invoice me, and I pay the invoice, and then the normal rules apply. However,
almost. I think you're missing a point.
Okay.
It depends whether the work is done in Sweden or abroad.
Right. Yes. So the work is done abroad, and then if they were a registered business, I would use the normal rules for VAT that apply to countries within the EU or countries outside of EU. So that much I can do myself. But what I'm curious about is what if this person is not a registered?
There are many different set of rules in such a situation. You mentioned VAT.
Yes.
VAT is only one of many aspects
Yes.
of doing business.
Of course.
You have income tax as well, and you have social security contributions.
Yes, and is that something? If the work is done abroad, is that something that I have to worry about, or is that something that is completely the responsibility of the other person?
Okay, so if the work is done by a person living abroad and the work is done abroad,
Yes.
the person is not, unless it's a person from Sweden that is abroad just for that time, the person is not a taxable person in Sweden.
Yes.
Not for the income if it is paid as a salary, and not if it's paid as the sum on an invoice. So even if the person is a business person, or if it is a regular employee, the person does not pay income tax in Sweden.
Yeah. So it's nothing that I have to worry about. No income tax for the person, not even employer tax for the person, if they are not a Swedish citizen. Is that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, please explain. I'm curious to know. And please do not interrupt me, because I feel that you're interrupting me all the time, and that is a bit annoying for me.
Du låter som du är svensk.
Jo, det är jag faktiskt, men jag vill prata engelska för att jag vill att andra ska förstå vad jag säger, så att jag slipper översätta. Så kan vi ta det på engelska? Är det okej?
Det finns fler personer än du i samtalet.
Ja, det är flera som ska ta del av det här, för att det här är väldigt intressant. Det här är väldigt intressant område. Vad sa du?
Spelar du in samtalet?
Det stämmer, det gör jag.
Okej.
Är det okej med dig?
Det är sånt som du gärna får fråga innan när du spelar in, om det är okej eller inte.
Absolut, det kan jag göra.
Jag har inget emot det, så fortsätt.
All right. Förklara gärna för mig lite mer vad som gäller för mig när det gäller en person som inte är svensk medborgare och inte utför jobbet i Sverige. So the person is not a Swedish citizen and does not do the work in Sweden, and I would like to hire them as for example. As for example, I would do through one of those consultant brokers, but in that case, it works more like I'm paying another business. So that I'm very clear about. But what I'm not very clear about is what rules apply to me as a business owner in Sweden, if I or should I hire somebody who is not a registered business, who is maybe a private person but in another country?
Okay. If the person is not a taxable person in Sweden, and I'm talking only about income tax now, not VAT.
Right.
Yes. Then you have no obligations to pay any preliminary tax to Skatteverket.
Yes.
Preliminary tax to Skatteverket will have no relevance here. So you cannot apply the same rules you would apply for an employee working in Sweden.
Yeah, so so that would be a preliminary tax. What you mean is the preliminary tax for the income of that particular person.
Yes, the salary you pay. If it's not a deal between two independent business people.
Yes.
Then it's an employee situation. The person works for you and you pay salary.
Yes, for example, on an hourly basis, but maybe not as officially an employee, but the relationship itself would kind of look more like an independent business, but maybe the person hasn't had time to actually register their own business. But I'm kind of thinking, is that even something that I have to worry about, or is that completely the responsibility of the other person to make sure that they are a registered business?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we have to be specific to give you the answer. You should try to avoid simplifications and to just assume, because it's this way in one situation, that it's always this way.
Right.
So in the particular situation that the person does not need to pay tax on whatever you pay the person, then you don't have to worry about paying something to Skatteverket.
Right.
But of course, you are still, through the contract with this person, an employer or a business partner for this person, which means that maybe you need to, if you're an employer, if you have that responsibility, maybe you have to follow the rules in the country where the work is being done on your behalf. So if that country requires an employer to register, if the other country requires an employer to pay preliminary tax, if the other country requires an employer to pay social security contributions, the equivalent of our arbetsgivaravgifter, but in the other countries' procedure, then of course you have to fulfill these obligations from the law of the country where the work is being done on your behalf.
Okay, all right. Now we're getting somewhere. That's interesting. Right. So, in what?
The only other obligation you have, if you are paying a salary, meaning you are not paying the invoice of another person, if you are paying a salary, is to send us to Skatteverket an income statement, in Swedish, kontrolluppgift.
Yeah, exact. Yes. So, and how is that? How does that then? I suppose there would be a separate option for sending the kontrolluppgift for a person that is in a different country, because then there is no. Then this sum of money that's being paid to the person is not going to be part of the traditional salary that's paid for somebody who is based in Sweden. So I suppose there would be a separate option for that, right? When the declaration is due to be sent into Skatteverket.
If the person was a person that is insured in the Swedish Social Security, or if the person is a taxable person in Sweden.
No, that would not be the case. That would not be the case. So we're not talking about anybody who is taxable in Sweden.
Yes, but I'm still trying to answer the question you asked me.
Okay, thank you.
Because you said, I assume it's a separate option, and that's what I'm commenting now. Yes,
okay, thank you.
It is different because in 2019 there is a different way to deal with employees in Sweden and abroad compared to how it was 2018. In 2019, an employer sends payee report, PAYE, in Swedish, arbetsgivardeklaration.
Yeah.
This year it includes detail on the individual employee. Last year it wasn't like that. So this year we have what we call arbetsgivardeklaration på individnivå.
Okay, interesting. So so then.
However, a person, an employee that is not part of the Swedish Social Security, and a person that is not taxed for the salary, you don't need to use the arbetsgivardeklaration på individnivå. You can use the same document that one would have used last year, 2018, for the same thing. It's the income statement, the kontrolluppgift called KU14, special income statement.
Special in what sense?
It's special because it's a special case. It's a case where the person does not necessarily belong to the Swedish Social Security and not necessarily is taxed on the income. It's a special income statement for these cases.
Right. Okay. And that was named KU 14. Okay. Thanks. Right. So if the person is not taxable in Sweden, then what details do I need to know about the person? So, because I assume that this information that is given in this declaration, KU14, is...
KU14 is not a declaration, it's a statement.
Okay, yeah, income statement for the person that lives abroad.
It's a statement from the employer. This is how much I have paid.
Yeah, and I assume that information is...
And we use the information to send it to the country where the person lives and has done the work, so they can tax the person.
Yeah, right. That was actually my next question. So this is information that I send to you for the purpose that you can forward it to the other country, and so that they can take care of the tax questions related to that particular person. Yeah. So that means essentially that I have to have proof of ID for the person, obviously, but maybe even something else, maybe some kind of tax number that belongs to that person, or depending on how things are done in their country, then I suppose I would have to find out, and that would be my responsibility as an employer. Even though it's kind of very similar relationship to not being an employer, but rather rather accepting the person as a subcontractor. So in every way, that is that kind of relationship, but with a single difference that maybe that person is not a registered business, so they can't actually be counted as a subcontractor. And based on what you said, I think they count more like an employee then, because they can only be one of the two.
Yes, actually, it's when you agree with the person how to exchange the person's work capacity for money, your money against the person's work capacity. When you discuss that agreement, you should discuss whether the agreement you are doing is an agreement between a person with more responsibility as an employer and the other person is just an employee.
Yeah.
Or if you are doing a business deal, two business persons, between two business persons, that is one of the things you need to discuss. If the person says, oh no, I'm not really interested in doing business on my own, deal with me as you would any other employee in your company, then you know what to do.
Right.
If this person says, oh no, I never do it like that. I have hundreds of different people I sell my services to, and I have a business, I know exactly what to do. I will send you an invoice, then you do it like that.
Yes, of course.
The thing is, generally, I don't know if it's that way in every country. You haven't said which country you're speaking about, but in most countries, there's a number of obligations attached to calling yourself an independent a business person, an independent contractor, an independent sole trader.
Yeah.
Because when you say you are independent, then that also means you take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah, and for the taxes that it entails.
And for the taxes, and not only taxes, for a number of other things. Bookkeeping, for instance. How can you run a business without keeping close watch on the economy? So meaning you keep books over every invoice sent and every invoice paid also.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you don't know if your company is going well or if it's not going well.
Yeah. But my question is more related to whether I need to worry about that for the other person, or whether
you need to decide between you and the other person if you are dealing with the person as an employee or if you are dealing with the other person as a person on the same level of responsibility as you are as a business person.
Yeah, right. So let's assume for a while that that it's a person that in the beginning would kind of count more as an employee. Then the next question is, in terms of my liability in the other country, obviously I want to be aware of my responsibilities when it comes to sending any necessary paperwork. I suppose that based on what you said, I should really consider each country specifically and maybe call their revenue services and ask what rules apply in their country.
Or just Google.
Yeah, exactly. Although sometimes it doesn't really, Googling doesn't really get me the right information. For example, in this particular case,
if you know what you're looking for.
Exactly. So that's kind of the prerequisite for finding something on Google, is that you know what you're looking for, but you also have to be able to express it in the correct keywords.
Absolutely. But I have another suggestion for you: is use the contact you have with this other person. Ask them to tell you where is the right information in that country.
Yeah, absolutely. I usually like to go outside, sort of, to kind of probe myself and see what actually applies. And I think in this particular case, I'm more interested to know what applies to me. So I think it's not really the correct, asking the other person is not really the correct action to take, because I'm more interested what applies to me both in Sweden and now that you mentioned it, also in the other country. And do I have to worry about any particular issues that may creep up if related to the responsibilities that I have, or that I may have but not know about in the other country? Because this is something new for me in terms of I've been working with subcontractors a lot in different countries, and that part is easy for me. I can they can just invoice me. I can pay the invoices, and I can also invoice other people in other countries, and that part is very easily handled by the rules that apply for general trading with other countries, and also that information is easy to find. But what I want to expand a little bit more on is that, for example, there are people that have skills that may be employees in other countries, and maybe I would like to make use of their skills on a limited basis. And in that case, they're probably employees, and maybe they want to remain employees in the other country. But I'm still curious, what are my responsibilities in terms of both doing the right paperwork here in Sweden, but also in this case, maybe the other country wouldn't really like me doing that, paying that person without actually filing some specific paperwork. Obviously I want to know about that ahead of time, so that I don't have to fix things after the fact later.
Yeah. So start by finding out what the name of the local tax authority is.
Right. So what you're saying is that from the Swedish perspective, there is really nothing for me to consider specifically unless the person is taxable in Sweden. What about the VAT?
There's a few things. There's this controluppgift.
Yes, the KU14. So that's just telling you that I've paid this sum to somebody who is an employee but in another country.
Yes.
Right. But beyond that, there is really like VAT or any kind of income tax is not applicable to anybody who is not actually living in Sweden or taxable in Sweden anyway.
VAT I'm unfortunately unable to help you with because it's not an area where I have any knowledge.
All right. Yeah, and I would suppose that VAT would be highly related to the particular rules of that country when they invoice me, so they would have to...
Yes. This is if you buy or sell a service, or if you buy or sell a product. It's not something one thinks about when speaking about employment.
Right. Yeah.
No,
but it's still worth asking though, because it's kind of like in the most general sense the way the relationship works, in at least in the beginning it would be more like kind of like handling an independent contractor, with the sole exception that maybe the person is not registered in the country yet, but maybe the person will be registered later. Maybe the person would get like FA skatt but in the other country, so they can both be an employee and be an independent contractor. But then in the beginning, it's kind of like they maybe want to invoice you because they plan to kind of get all the paperwork done, but they don't want to wait, and maybe you don't want to wait until it's all done. But you still want to know kind of what applies to you and what applies to that person as well.
Yeah. So it's what you want to find out is the equivalent of the Swedish rules around the godkännande förskatt.
Right. Okay, so I have a pretty good idea now. Thank you very much for your information, and thanks for this call.
You're welcome. Thank you for calling.
Yes, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, so it seems pretty clear that basically what I have to do is just call the revenue services of the other country and figure out if they will be pissed at anything that I do in terms of like hiring a citizen of their country. It's kind of like you would be hiring somebody who's an employee in a different company, and just you kind of want to know if the other company is okay with that, because some people just offer their services. They kind of try to, it's kind of like they're cheating on their girlfriend or something. They kind of try to offer you the services and they don't tell anything to their employer, and what can happen then is that maybe their employer finds out, and their employer wants to stop the collaboration, and obviously you have to know about that, because if that collaboration is suddenly stopped, like, you have to find a solution for that to replace that person. So yeah, it's interesting, but very good call, and I'm happy that I've been live streaming this, because I think this could be useful to many people, especially people who are working in Sweden and would like to hire other people from other countries, and maybe experiment or explore this way of working. I hope this was interesting. It certainly was for me. If I ever do any calls into revenue services of another country, then I think it would be probably useful to live stream that as well. So thanks for watching, and subscribe to my channel, go to my Discord, and submit some information. If you are an embedded engineer, submit some information to me to info@swedishembedded.com, and tell me what you're doing, tell me what you want to do in the future, and then I may consider you for a project in the future, and maybe we can work together. Thanks for watching. Bye.